You know, saying goodbye to someone you love, it's one of the hardest things we ever have to do. So what we're going to talk about today is a story about navigating that process. But it's also a practical guide, really, to honoring someone in a way that feels right and, well, doesn't break the bank. We're going to follow a daughter's journey right here in Annapolis in Ireland, as she finds her own way to say farewell. And it all kicked off with these words from James Carter, a Navy veteran, just ringing in his daughter Denise's head. It's such a simple, direct command, right? But it brings up a really big question. How do you honor a parent's memory when the traditional ways just feel overwhelming or maybe even wrong? So when Denise actually sat down with a funeral home, this is the number they put in front of her for a traditional funeral and burial: $11,000. I mean, for a lot of people, it's an impossible amount of money. But for Denise, it was more than that. It just felt wrong. It went against everything her dad stood for. Okay, so let's get to the heart of this story. This is Denise Carter and her father, James. These two are pure Annapolis. James was a Navy vet, spent his whole life on or near the water. He had this saying, that the smell of salt and diesel, yeah, that was the smell of home. And that deep connection to the Chesapeake Bay is really what this is all about.
So you can imagine this huge price tag just didn't sit right. Her dad's life wasn't about fancy, expensive things. It was about pride in his service, in his work, in his love for the Bay. An $11,000 bill just didn't feel like him. And that feeling, that disconnect, is what pushed Denise to find another way.
In the past she found, it was cremation. But it's really important to get this. This wasn't just about the money. This was a choice to do something more personal, something that actually fit. This choice, it gave her the freedom to give her father the dignity he deserved, but to do it on their own terms. Okay, so first things first, she had to figure out how this whole thing works. Turns out, in Maryland, it's actually pretty simple. The most important piece of paper is a cremation authorization form, which the next of kin signs. After that, the family gets the cremated remains, and then the big question is, well, what do you do next?
And that question, that's what really kicked off the next chapter of her journey. I mean, keeping the ashes on a shelf at home, that just didn't feel right for a man who loved the open water. She really wanted a permanent place she could go visit, a spot that felt connected to his life in Annapolis. So her search led her to the beautiful, historic St. Anne's Cemetery, right in the middle of downtown Annapolis. But of course, that just opened up a whole new can of worms. What were the rules? Could you even bury an urn there? She had to get into the nitty-gritty.
So what looked like it was going to be this huge, complicated thing, it actually boiled down to a few simple steps. Seriously, Denise just picked up the phone, and the person on the other end was super helpful and just walked her right through it. No special planners needed, just a straightforward conversation.
And the paperwork? It wasn't some scary mountain of forms and red tape. Nope, it was really just these 3 key pieces of paper. It just goes to show you, with a little bit of guidance, you can absolutely handle the logistics on your own.
So while she was figuring all this out, she kept hearing this term, urn vault. So what is it? Well, it's basically a protective container that the urn goes into in the ground. And while it's not a state law in Maryland, most cemeteries require one, and there's a good reason for it. It's just to keep the ground from sinking over time. Pretty practical. Another little detail she picked up was about how deep they actually bury the urn. Turns out, for an urn, it's only about 2 feet down. And you know, it's little facts like this that really take the mystery out of the whole thing. Makes it feel a lot less intimidating. All right, so she's got all the practical stuff figured out. But now came what, for her, was the toughest part: finding the perfect urn. This wasn't just a box. It had to be the final tribute to her dad.
You have to understand, her dad was a guy who took immense pride in everything. His work, his tools, his Navy uniform, everything had its place and was treated with respect. So one of those generic off-the-shelf urns? No way, that just wasn't gonna cut it. She had to find something that felt like him.
And then she found it. And this description, I mean, it just says everything. She found a handcrafted urn that was this deep navy blue with these silvery swirls running through it. It looked like the Chesapeake Bay he loves so much. It looked like home. And making that choice, finding that urn, it changed everything. So this brings us to the final moment. There wasn't a huge crowd or some fancy service. It was just a quiet, peaceful goodbye. And it was a million miles away from that stressful, expensive meeting she'd had at the very beginning. And the setting, it was just perfect.
St. Anne's, right there downtown. You could hear the seagulls from the harbor, the sounds of Annapolis all around. It was just a calm, beautiful morning that fit the moment perfectly.
The ceremony itself, it was so simple but so powerful. She only brought two things with her: a single American flag for his Navy service and this little anchor charm that used to hang from the rearview mirror in his truck. Tiny little things, right? But they carried so much history, so much meaning.
Okay, so what can we pull from Denise's story? Her whole experience is basically a roadmap for anyone who might find themselves in a similar situation. It proves that taking a personal approach isn't just possible, it's incredibly powerful. So here are the big things you need to know. First, you can absolutely bury urns in any licensed cemetery in Maryland. Second, you'll probably need to get one of those urn vaults. And that paperwork we talked about, it really just comes down to three things: the death certificate, the cremation certificate, and the cemetery's authorization form. Oh, and a quick but important note. If you're ever thinking about burying an urn on private land, your very first call has to be to your local county zoning office.
I think the biggest thing to take away from all this is that Denise did this whole thing on her own. It took a few calls and a couple of forms, sure, but mostly it took a lot of heart. It just proves that you really can navigate this and create a tribute that feels right. And that brings us right back to where we started, with her dad's words. In the end, that's exactly what she did. She didn't make a big fuss. She just followed her heart and did what felt right, creating something that was respectful, affordable, and just true to him. So this whole story leaves us with a really important question to think about. Because if Denise's journey teaches us anything, it's that a fitting tribute has absolutely nothing to do with how much you spend. It's about love, it's about memory, and it's about finding that one place that feels, in the end, like coming home.